I built the fence myself. Each post was driven into the earth with care, lined in perfect symmetry, and fortified against the dry Texas wind that never stopped howling across the plains. Cedar beams, barbed wire, nothing flashy, just the kind of sturdy perimeter a man needs when he's got horses to keep in and coyotes to keep out. After 30 years in law enforcement, retirement brought me back to where it all began. My grandfather's ranch on the outskirts of Cedar Ridge. It was rough land, sure, but it was honest. My hands still knew the work, and my heart was glad for the silence. I didn't move out, here for neighbors, block parties, or bake sales. I came for peace, solitude, freedom. Then a letter arrived. At first glance, I thought it was junk mail. One of those glossy HOA bulletins I usually tossed without reading. But the bold red stamp caught my eye. Notice of non-compliance. Fine issued. I unfolded the trifold and scanned the paragraph-heavy jargon. My brow furrowed. According to the Cedar Ridge Meadows Homeowners Association, my newly built ranch fence violated Section 4B, non-approved modifications. They demanded I remove it within 14 days or face a fine. The amount, $3,800. I stared at the number, dumbfounded. A fence, on land my family had owned for over 70 years. A fence built with my own hands, for my own safety, was now unauthorized. Had to be a mistake. The next morning, I got my answer. A dusty white sedan pulled up to the edge of my gravel driveway, and out stepped a man who looked more like a substitute math teacher than anyone with real authority. Thin tie, clipboard, loafers not fit for ranch terrain. He approached with artificial confidence. "Mr. Maddox?" "That's me," I replied, arms crossed, standing by the front gate. "I'm Curtis Witherspoon, Compliance Officer for Cedar Ridge Meadows HOA. I'm here regarding your recent property modification." He said it like I'd built a casino. "Fence?" I asked. Curtis didn't smile. He adjusted his glasses and peered at the structure like he was appraising livestock. Per HOA guidelines, all exterior modifications must receive written approval from the Architectural Review Committee. Your fence, while rustic, does not meet aesthetic or material standards. I raised an eyebrow. Rustic is the point. It's a ranch. You know what those are, right? Curtis checked his clipboard. This subdivision was unified under HOA management in 2014. Your parcel falls within jurisdictional boundaries. Boundaries? I took a step closer. This land's been in my family since before Cedar Ridge had indoor plumbing. My grandfather built the original fence with mesquite and barbed wire. I rebuilt it the same way. Curtis maintained his tone. Cool, robotic. You'll need to submit a formal application for architectural approval. Meanwhile, the current fine stands. Further, non-compliance could result in property liens. That word, liens, hit like a slap. I motioned to the long, dusty road behind him. "You can turn around now. This is private property." Curtis didn't argue. He simply pulled out his phone, snapped photos of the fence, and walked back to his car without another word. As his tires crunched over gravel and faded into the distance, something shifted inside me. Not anger, not yet, but something colder. A realization that peace, true peace, was going to take more than strong wood and quiet mornings. That night, I dug through every deed, plat, and survey we had on file. My grandfather had kept meticulous records. I found a yellowed map, still bearing the county seal, from 1951, showing clear boundaries, ones that didn't match anything Curtis mentioned. But I wasn't ready to act just yet. Instead, I waited. I watched. And over the next few days, the letters kept coming, each one colder, more aggressive, more fines, more threats. They piled up like kindling on dry brush. Then came the contractor. I was hauling hay when I saw the truck idling near my front gate. A man in a reflective vest hopped out with tools in hand and made his way toward the fence like he owned the place. I parked fast and strode up to him. "What do you think you're doing?" "Compliance correction," he said, barely looking up. "Just following work orders from the HOA." My blood ran hot. "You're trespassing," I warned. "Touch that fence and you'll wish you weren't." He backed off quickly, muttering something about calling Curtis. That night, as the sun dipped behind the hills, I sat on the porch with a glass of iced tea and stared at that fence, weathered but proud, like every man in my family who'd worked. This land. I knew what I had to do. They thought I'd roll over. They thought they could bully me with bureaucracy and threaten me with paper. They had no idea who they were messing with, and I was just getting started. Curtis Witherspoon's weekly fines kept showing up like clockwork, each more threatening than the last. Legalese dripped from the letters like venom. Failure to comply. Escalated enforcement. Pending lien placement. I wasn't some wide-eyed city transplant. I was a retired sheriff. I'd spent 3 decades sniffing out lies and enforcing laws, written to protect the innocent. But the way the HOA operated, it reeked of petty tyranny, masquerading as policy. And now they were coming for my land. I drove into town and paid a visit to the county clerk's office. My boots echoed off the marble floors as I approached the records desk, where an older woman named Linda sat beneath a flickering fluorescent light. She'd been there longer than most of the records themselves. "Afternoon, Linda," I greeted, looking for some clarity on property lines and HOA covenants. She tilted her glasses and smiled. "You finally got tangled up with those HOA folks, huh?" I nodded grimly. "They think my land's under their thumb." Linda shuffled through a file cabinet, pulled out a stack of documents, and laid them across the desk like a dealer laying down a royal flush. "Here's your plat from '83, and here's the annexation filing from Cedar Ridge Meadows HOA in 2014. Take a look at the signatures." I leaned in. Only 3 of the required 5 property owners had signed. The notary stamp. Expired. My jaw clenched. This wouldn't hold up in traffic court. Linda chuckled. "No, sir, it would not." Back at the ranch, I pored over the documents until the sun dipped low. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. Their entire claim of jurisdiction over my ranch was built on a house of cards, improper filings, procedural errors, and an expired set of bylaws that no one had ever renewed. I needed backup. I called an old friend, Jackson Miles. He'd been the legal muscle during my sheriff days, one of the few lawyers who didn't wear his spine like spaghetti. "Let me guess," he said when he answered. "You've got a paper tyrant trying to push you off your land." "You got it. Think we can nail 'em?" Jackson's voice sharpened. "Not only can we nail them, we can bury their whole operation if what you're saying checks out." He drove out the next morning, suit jacket slung over one shoulder, boots dusted from a courtroom parking lot. We set up shop in my den and began collecting every HOA notice, fee schedule, and boundary map. Jackson's face lit up like Christmas when I handed him the documents Linda had pulled. "This," he said, tapping the invalid covenant signature sheet, "is a smoking gun." Meanwhile, Curtis and the HOA board continued their campaign of intimidation. One afternoon, a manila envelope appeared on my gate. Inside, a final warning and notice of pending foreclosure proceedings. They claimed the fines had ballooned to over $6,400, citing non-compliance and legal processing costs. They weren't just trying to punish me, They were trying to steal my land. That evening, as I watched the sun bleed across the hills, I realized this wasn't just about a fence anymore. This was about ownership, about standing your ground when bullies hide behind clipboards and titles, about reminding people like Curtis that land doesn't just come with grass and trees. It comes with history, with legacy, with pride. Jackson filed the lawsuit the next day. We alleged the HOA had overstepped its legal boundaries, applied invalid rules to non-members, and attempted to enforce expired regulations through intimidation tactics. We included evidence of procedural fraud, improper annexation, and forged documentation. The court date was set for 30 days out, and just like that, the HOA blinked. Curtis showed up again, this time without his sunglasses or smug expression. He stayed behind the gate, wringing his hands like a man watching his house burn. "Mr. Maddox," he called, voice less confident. "There's no need for all this legal trouble. We'd be willing to work something out, maybe waive the fine. If I didn't let him finish. You trespassed on my land, threatened to take my home, tried to shame me with rules that don't even apply. You had your chance, Curtis. Now I'll see you in court." He swallowed hard and walked away. As I stood by that cedar fence, sunset blazing behind it, wind rustling, the tall grass, I felt a calm settle over me, the kind of calm that comes when you stop turning the other cheek. I wasn't fighting for just myself anymore. I was fighting for every neighbor too afraid to speak up, and I had a feeling the courtroom would be the perfect place to make my voice heard. The courthouse smelled like old wood and forgotten arguments. Pale morning light filtered through stained glass windows as Jackson and I stepped into courtroom 2B, our boots echoing against polished tile. I'd worn my old sheriff's jacket, not out of nostalgia, but as a quiet reminder to everyone in that room that I knew what justice looked like. At the other table sat Curtis Witherspoon, stiff-backed and jittery, accompanied by a woman in a charcoal grey suit who looked like she charged $400 an hour just to send emails. Her name was Meredith Sharp, the HOA's legal muscle, slick, composed, and already annoyed that a rancher had dared drag her into a real fight. Judge Ellison entered, mid-60s, silver hair, a reputation for no-nonsense rulings. She looked at us with the kind of wary interest reserved for wildfires and political scandals. "Let's get started," she said briskly. Case 4271, Maddox versus Cedar Ridge, Meadows HOA. Allegation of unlawful enforcement of expired covenants and unauthorized fines. Plaintiff, proceed. Jackson stood, calm and clear. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Maddox, is a retired sheriff and long-standing property owner in what was formerly unincorporated Cedar Ridge. The HOA in question claims jurisdiction over his land based on annexation procedures initiated in 2014. We will demonstrate today that those procedures were invalid, improperly executed, and never lawfully ratified." He slid a thick file onto the judge's bench with a soft thump. "Furthermore," he continued, "the HOA has enforced expired bylaws, issued escalating fines, and threatened foreclosure, despite lacking legal authority." Judge Ellison nodded slowly, flipping through the documents. "And the defense?" Meredith rose, her voice measured and crisp. "Your Honor, the HOA acted in good faith to preserve neighborhood standards. While there may have been clerical errors in the annexation process, Mr. Maddox was notified multiple times and refused to comply. Our actions were consistent with precedent and within our understanding of our charter." Curtis nodded vigorously beside her, like a bobblehead on trial. I watched Judge Ellison's brow furrow. "I'd like to hear about this annexation. Jackson pulled out a copy of the 2014 document and circled the signature section with his pen. Only 3 of the 5 required landowners signed. 2 signatures are missing. Moreover, the notary stamp was expired at the time of execution. This document is legally void. He let the silence hang. Meredith shifted in her seat. Your Honor, the HOA was unaware of the notary issue. That doesn't make it valid. The judge interrupted. Continue. Jackson laid down a series of dated notices, emails, and photographs, proof of the fence, the fines, and the contractor trespassing on my property. When he played the recording of Curtis admitting he was there under HOA orders to tear it down, the courtroom went quiet. Even Meredith glanced sideways at her client. When Curtis took the stand, he looked like a man caught stealing from the collection plate. Did you personally authorize entry onto Mr. Maddox's land? Jackson asked. Curtis fumbled with his collar. Yes, but I was following policy. Policy from an expired charter. Curtis hesitated. We believed no further questions, Jackson said sharply, and sat down. Judge Ellison closed the file. She looked at me, then at Curtis, then back again. Mr. Maddox, your evidence is compelling. The HOA clearly overstepped. The annexation is invalid. The fines are unenforceable, and the threats of foreclosure were reckless and unjustified. Curtis visibly deflated. I am voiding all penalties issued by the HOA to Mr. Maddox, she continued. Furthermore, I'm ordering a formal audit of Cedar Ridge Meadows, legal authority and operations. Should further misconduct surface, this court will consider additional sanctions. Bang! Gavel down. I exhaled, steady and quiet, like I used to. After closing a case, as we left the courthouse, the hallway buzzed with murmurs. Local ranchers, some of whom I didn't even know, clapped me on the back or nodded silently in respect. One woman whispered, "Thank you." They fined my dad for painting his barn red. Outside, Jackson grinned. You didn't just win. You opened the floodgates. I looked up at the wide Texas sky, as blue and defiant as ever. For the first time in months, I felt like the land beneath my boots was mine again. Curtis walked by with his head down, flanked by his lawyer. He didn't make eye contact. Good. He didn't need to see the smile on my face. Because this wasn't just a personal victory. It was the beginning of something bigger, and I wasn't done yet. 2 weeks after the ruling, my mailbox, once stuffed with threats, was now brimming with letters of gratitude, handwritten notes from neighbors, emails from strangers who'd seen the case in the local news. Some called me a hero. I wasn't looking for that. I just wanted the right thing done, and if that meant dragging the HOA into the light, so be it. What I didn't expect was how fast the cracks in their little empire started to widen. First came the audit. Judge Ellison hadn't been bluffing. A county-appointed investigator showed up with a thick clipboard and zero patience. He started digging into HOA bank records, board member activities, election logs, things most folks didn't even know HOAs were supposed to keep clean. Turns out they hadn't. Curtis Witherspoon resigned 3 days after the investigation began. No explanation, no apology, just a pale-faced exit and a hasty, for personal reasons, email to the HOA mailing list. But it was too late. The community wanted answers. A special meeting was called at the Cedar Ridge Clubhouse. I didn't plan to go until a neighbor named Ruth showed up at my gate. "Please, Mr. Maddox," she said, gripping the steering wheel of her golf cart. "They've been running this neighborhood like a private kingdom for years. You've got the backbone to say what we're all thinking." That night, the clubhouse was packed. Folding chairs scraped the tile floor. Angry murmurs buzzed in the air like hornets. Meredith Sharp was there too, though now she looked more like a weary accountant than a high-powered attorney. A frail man with a clipboard tried to begin the meeting with the usual formalities, but the crowd wasn't having it. "Let Maddox speak," someone shouted. So I did. I walked up to the front with no notes, no mic, just my voice and the truth. I was fined for offense. I began. But it was never about the fence. Silence settled. It was about control, about power, handed to people who forgot what they were supposed to protect. This HOA used fear, fines, legal threats. They counted on silence, but silence feeds bullies. And I'm done being quiet. Applause erupted. Not polite, fierce, raw. They forged annexation papers. I continued. They trespassed. They tried to take land that didn't belong to them. And if I hadn't stood up in court, they'd still be doing it. A woman in the back raised her hand. My mother had a $900 fine for hanging wind chimes. A man added, "They towed my truck from my own driveway." One by one, voices joined mine. Stories poured out. Years of resentment boiled over in the span of minutes. The facade of the HOA's authority crumbled like dry earth in a storm. By the end of the night, a vote was held, loud, fast, and unanimous. The board was dissolved. A temporary committee was formed to rebuild from the ground up, with transparency, oversight, and actual community input. And they asked me to chair it. I said no. I didn't do this to run the show, I said. I did it so no one else could be run over by it. Instead, I helped draft a new charter. One with limits, checks, no secret meetings, no power plays, just basic respect and responsibility. As for my fence, it still stands. Stronger now, after I added some extra bracing. I carved a small phrase into the top rail with my pocket knife the day after the court ruling. Stand your ground. Simple, clear, true. A few months later, I got a visit from a young family who just moved in down the road. The father had a firm handshake. The mother smiled warmly, and their little girl waved at my horses like they were old friends. "We heard about what you did," the father said. "Thank you. It means something." I tipped my hat. "Just looking out for the land." He hesitated, then asked, "Think I could borrow your fence design? I want to build one like it." I smiled. "I'll even help you dig the posts." As they drove off, a breeze rolled across the field, cool and honest, the kind that carries stories from one ridge to the next. And I knew, deep down, that this wasn't just the end of a fight. It was the start of something better, something earned, something free.